welcome to our 2021 edition of One Step Beyond. My name's Sophie Jump, and together with Richard Siddle of The Buyer, we founded the concept of One Step Beyond, which has the ambition of keeping the drinks trade on top of the latest trends and development all around consumer, innovation and technology. And we're really grateful for the continued support of the Wine and Spirits Trade Association in the UK, and also our partners Picks, Stranger and Stranger, and Frisian Cope Stick, who make it possible for us to curate and manage these events. As always, we've got a fast and furious program, so I'm going to hurry up. But just to summarize, we're going to cover lots of varied topics: the latest trends in consumer behavior, building your business and brand through your people, harnessing intelligent misbehavior, I'm not quite sure what that is yet, but we'll all find out together, and building e-commerce and digital strategies through content. There's going to be a mixture of presentations, conversations, conflabations. I think I made that word up. It sounds good. Please put any queries or comments via the Q&A. This is being recorded. It will be circulated. Richard, anything to add before we dive in?
No, just to say thank you for coming. Well, welcome to you all. Appreciate it's been a long day for some of us in the UK, and I can assure you today's session will only be going to 90 minutes, and there'll be no extra time or anything else.
Brilliant. Okay, great stuff. Well, we're going to jump straight in with you, Katie. If you want to unmute, get your video and content share. And Katie is the managing director of CAM Media, which specializes in providing grocery, retail and hospitality sectors with consumer insights. And that's what she's going to talk to us about. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you so much. Let's just share this. Right, you should now be able to see that. Welcome. Thank you very much for that introduction, Sophie, and thanks for asking me to come on today. I really don't need to tell you what I do because Sophie's just covered that, but essentially we work with brands and with operators and with retailers and everybody that works in the retail and hospitality sectors. And our whole MO is to educate and inform those clients as to what consumers do and don't want from them. So I'm going to jump straight in because I know that we are short of time, and unlike last night, we can't go to extra time, as Richard said. So let's reset the scene a little bit. We know that we've had a tough time. I don't need to tell anybody that. 52% of people who have spoken to as part of a YouGov tracker described 2020 as bad or terrible. There were some other words used as well, I'm told. The top 3 emotions amongst Brits in January was stressed, frustrated and bored. But actually now we are turning a bit of a corner with consumer sentiment, and 48% describe themselves as happy. That survey was definitely not done this morning. We are feeling far less fearful than we were as well. In March 2020, 36% of people said, yeah, I'm scared for the future. Whereas at the moment, only around 9% are using that descriptive emotion to say how they're feeling. Are we ready to get back out there though? And this is the interesting point. 60% of consumers that we spoke to as part of a project that we recently conducted with Zonal told us that they were intending to go to a pub or a restaurant this summer. And of course, some people do have money to burn. So around 1 in 3 Brits have increased their savings during the pandemic. But it's also worth noting that the average household income has declined by around £517 per month. And we've also got to remember that 39% of people actually are quite insecure about socializing again. You know, they are still slightly worried about what's going on. A third still want to continue to wear face masks in pubs and restaurants. Although the good news for the hospitality industry is that that figure is actually around just under 50% for those in grocery retail. So there's a bit more feeling of positivity around not wearing a face mask in hospitality. 41% don't feel 100% safe in pubs and 31% in restaurants and supermarkets. So we just have to be aware of how the consumer is feeling. You know, this whole idea of we're getting back to normal, it's not going to be that simple and it's not going to be that quick. We also have to bear in mind that some people have liked some things about, staying in rather than going out during lockdown. And we've been working with a restaurant brand to bring what people enjoyed about lockdown into their restaurants. So to make it a bit more of a relaxed environment, to make sure that things are spaced out a little bit more, and that will continue, even once the restrictions are lifted on the 19th of June, if indeed they are lifted. We also have to remember that so many people have enjoyed their time at home. If you were trying to buy a decent TV or a stereo system, not that those exist anymore, but I don't know, a Bose speaker or something like that, in sort of July last year, you would have been absolutely out of luck, because those people that did have the money to spend were spending it on their homes. So you can see there all of the increase in subscription services and video and online gaming. And I think it's really important to understand how people are interacting, how consumers are interacting with brands in their own homes. So this is some research that we actually ran with Slurp, and we asked people, have you heard of a subscription recipe box, like Mindful Chef, etc., a cook-at-home meal kit? And what you can see is what's more interesting than just the consumer awareness, and you can see that first bit there, as to what percentage of people have heard of these particular offerings. The participation is quite high for something that's so new. And then I would consider buying is higher still. So, these are areas that we need to be aware of, that consumers are starting to participate in and want to participate in, more importantly. So will hospitality continue to move into the home, into hospitality at home, as we call it? 89% of people who had an at-home delivery from a restaurant brand said they would like them to keep delivering after restrictions lift. And 62% wanted their favorite restaurant brands to start selling cook or finish at home meal boxes nationwide. So it's really interesting here to see that some of the research that we've conducted tells us that of every 4 hospitality visits that we would have expected pre-pandemic, at least one of those is going to become a hospitality at home occasion. So, we're calling it the tale of two tables, that idea that as a hospitality brand, you need to be thinking about somebody's home table as well as a table within your outlet. And we've seen so much amazing innovations in the food and drink industry. And these are just a few that I've been lucky enough to enjoy myself. Letterbox cocktails, and whether it's a cook at home kit or a finish at home kit. In fact, the Hawksmoor one was possibly my favorite one. But I can highly recommend them, and we are going to see consumers continuing to be part of that at home occasion, but in conjunction with their favorite food brands. And of course, we've also got to remember that grocery retailers are jumping in on this. You've got Morrison's, the big nights in, David's Kitchen, which is a great convenience store essentially up in Scotland. They're now catering for events and catering for people at home. So there's a real opportunity here to really make sure that we capture the consumer and allow them to interact with our brand in their home. So considerations here: how could growth in at-home hospitality impact your brands? How can suppliers and operators work together in this area? We're already seeing a lot of great collaboration, and there is a real desire to celebrate come what may. So how can we tap into that in the medium term? It's also very important to know that it's not all about alcohol anymore, she said with a wry smile, knowing how a lot of you are feeling out there right now. But it really isn't. So research that we ran in January this year for Low and No, 1 in 4 customer visits throughout the year does not contain any alcohol. That's 329 million visits per year in 2019 did not contain any alcohol. So we've got to really start thinking about how we look at how consumers are participating in drinking occasions. So lockdown's impact on alcohol consumption: 23% of the people we spoke to said that they drank less alcohol as a direct result of lockdowns in 2020, and 77% of consumers who have reduced their alcohol consumption as a result of lockdowns will continue to drink less alcohol this year. So again, it's just important that we understand that there are no and low occasions, and we need to make sure that we are providing a decent experience for people. You know, if I'm going to not drink when I go to a pub or a bar, which is incredibly unlikely, but if I was, I don't want my experience to be any lesser than the person next to me that is having a glass of wine, or someone like, if I'm having a low and no, and someone else is having a full ABV wine, you know, it needs to be the same. And especially when we start to look at the younger generation. So 2 in 5 18 to 24-year-olds describe themselves as teetotal. That's more than twice the number of UK adults. So Gen Z are drinking a lot more low and no drinks. They drink them sort of alongside alcoholic drinks as a way to regulate alcohol intake. And you can see there 1 in 4 have purchased a low or no brand in the last 12 months. So questions here. Are we putting enough focus on the growing low and no alcohol occasion? Do low and no brands appeal to Gen Z? Should they? Is that the right target for brands out there? So it has also been a real time for exploration. So they say it takes 6 weeks to break a habit or to create a habit. And old routines are really being broken and reset thanks to this pesky pandemic. 66% of Brits have made regular changes to their shopping baskets, and 39% have bought a brand that they have never tried before during lockdown. Now, this is actually looking at beer enthusiasts specifically, not necessarily wine, but this is a project that we did with Beer Broker. And anybody that wants these slides, by the way, drop me an email and I'm very happy to share them with anybody out there. I'll give you my email address at the end, or maybe Sophie can pass it on. But new habits really are formed. So 47% of the people who we spoke to, these are beer enthusiasts, so they regularly drink beer, said that they're drinking more of premium beers. So we're looking at a more sort of drinking less but drinking better attitude that has come out of the pandemic for beer drinkers. And I'm sure, I'm pretty convinced from research that we're currently doing with a wine brand that it's looking to be similar to that. For wine coming out of the pandemic. 57% of drinkers said that they were interested in searching out more unique beers. 75% have ordered direct to their home for the first time. So we're not just changing what we drink, we're changing how we actually access those drinks. So period of experimentation and exploration. There are new habits. We've got to understand what those consumer habits are. How might the growth of direct consumer impact brands, the desire for local subscriptions? You know, all of these things are growing, and all of them are changing the way that consumers interact with the food and drink industries. Digital has become our default. And I said even for grandma there, because I appear to be Apple helpline for my 91-year-old grandmother, who now does her shopping online on an iPad. So digital demand for digital is increasing across all the customer groups. We know that. But this is a question we asked as part of our research with Zonal. Has having a venue which offers mobile phone ordering and payment become more or less important to you? And you can see that it's more important to 52% of Gen Z, 24% of 55 plus. So even that older age group, sorry for describing it that way for anybody that sits in that group at the moment, but even for that older age group, it's becoming more important that we get smart at digital. And of course, when we get smart at digital, we manage to collect data. And there's a common misconception that we don't want to share our data with anyone. It's not the case. 78% of people are very willing to share more personal information as long as they then receive more personalized communications. I am really happy to share my details with my local pub because I know they will send me offers when the tennis is on or when the football's on. They're not going to send me something from the rugby. So that's it. I'm not interested in that. So we've got to just make sure that if we are taking people's data, we are personalizing those communications. And I know it can be an absolute pain to painstakingly go through a database and section things off, but it makes sense in the long run. So what does digital transformation mean for communication of your brands and products? How do your consumers interact with your brands digitally? How does that digital and face-to-face sort of work together? You know, should ordering apps and menus work in your favor? How do you make them work in your favor? And are you maximizing your use of customer data? So one final trend that I just want to cover off is what we call the conscious consumer. So that idea of I'm not just interested in getting a product to my door anymore. Actually, I'm really interested in what's behind that product. So this is figures from our Gen Z research program. And if you go onto our website, you can download this for the whole research program for free. Gen Z in particular believe that the ethics of the company have a massive influence on where they spend their money. So 55% say that the impact that brand has on my health makes a difference as to whether I purchase it or not. And it's 48% for the impact of the environment, 21% charity work, etc. So again, the consumer has become so much more conscious during this pandemic, and we just need to be aware of that. We used to call brands black box brands. They're now glass boxes. We can see through that, that media guff basically. And it's about being honest and really owning your mistakes. It's about talking to your customers in the same way as you would talk to a friend, essentially. So ethics, sustainability, single-use plastic, they were all 2019 trends. They didn't go away. They just became less important. They are now coming back into the minds of the consumers, and it's incredibly important that we operate within that glass box. We identify our weaknesses. What can brands get called out for? What should you be celebrating? And then just this final section, and it's kind of all goes together really, which is about health and wellness. Obviously, people want to be safe in venues. It was the #1 reasons why people weren't returning to hospitality when we first opened up. Only 18% though said that they didn't feel at all safe returning to a pub and bar, and that was before we'd reopened. So now we've reopened and people can see that safety, then I think that people will be reassured. But this trend goes much, much further, because health now means mental and emotional as well as physical, which I'm so happy for, because I do think that as a nation we needed to be making a bit more of an effort to understand that the mental and emotional fitness of the nation is as important as the physical. So we just have to remember that consumers are making conscious efforts to eat more healthily, to look after their mental health. What can we do as brands to help them on that journey? And then, Gen Z, what was it, 54% of people who want to eat more healthy. Well, Gen Z are amongst them. 10% of them are vegetarian, 11% are flexitarian, 1 in 4 are teetotal. They're leading a bit of a revolution in what we consume, and it's really important that we have those conversations with Gen Z, that we understand exactly what they want from us, because they're the future essentially. So what does the health trend mean for businesses and brands? How can you tap into that trend? How can we embrace supporting mental and emotional health as brands? And the desire to reconnect. 90% of people that we spoke to as part of a research program last year told us that going to the pub is good for their mental health. I don't think many England fans will be telling you that this morning. But to summarize, hospitality is moving into the home. Changing occasions creates a new venue for hospitality brands to enter. So, as a business, you need to decide whether that's somewhere that you want to play. Low and no is a really huge opportunity, growing 30.2% in the off-trade last year. Old habits are changing. We are much more exploratory, not just when we go out, but also in the home with the food that we're cooking and the wine and the beer that we're buying and trying. Consumers are more conscious, and they want to align with brands who share their values. And they are looking for healthier options. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be drinking anything, but it does mean that there might be a bit more mindful drinking occurring. That's our website address there. Please go on. Every single one of those research programs is free to download. Please go on and help yourselves. And that's my email address at the bottom there. I'm sure Sophie can share it as well. But if you've got any questions, or if you want a copy of the slides I've just rattled through, I'm really happy to share them with you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie. Fast and furious. We do have one question from David Gates, if you wouldn't mind just writing. Can you just write him an answer?
Yeah, I will do so. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And also, just to add, Katie's obviously focusing on the UK market, but I think that most of her observations will be pretty applicable, or parts of them, in all of your other countries, because I know we have a very international audience. So I'm going to hand over now to Richard, who's going to manage a conversation with Steve Ingham, who we're delighted to welcome amongst us. Steve is the global CEO of Page Group, which is one of the world's largest international recruitment specialist agencies. Sorry, Steve, nearly introduced the wrong person then. And he's going to talk about, you know, the everything that the impact that people have on your business and your brand and recruitment, a lot of key current issues. And Richard's also going to bring in afterwards Paul Marbury, who's the CEO of Pix, who's just set up a business during COVID times, and talk to him about how he's recruited his team. So it's over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Sophie. That's great. Nice to see you, Steve. Hope all well with you.
All very good, thank you. Yeah, little sad after last night, but otherwise good.
Yeah, I know exactly. Well, I know Sophie just gave you an idea there of what the Page Group does, which is essentially, you know, we mentioned consultancies or recruitment agencies, but could you just from your perspective sort of give the audience a sort of a view of what you see as your role within business, I suppose, in terms of helping business grow?
Sure. Well, I've been there 35 years, so if I can't answer that one, I'm in trouble, aren't I? So I've been at Page 35 years. I joined a business of a couple of hundred people, and today we're at 7,000 people. And as I'm talking to people in different international markets, we're in 37 countries. So we have offices and people in all of those countries. And we're actually probably the market leader in many of them. Most of the countries in Southeast Asia that we're in, mainland China, we're the market leader in Latin America, France, many countries within Europe, and in many of our markets, we are a market leader in the UK as well. So it's a pretty big business. We recruit white-collar professional people who've been to university. We operate under 3 brands: Page Personnel, which is the clerical professional market, and then we have Michael Page, which is the qualified professional market, middle management, and then we have a brand called Page Executive that focuses on higher level and C-suite appointments. So I've been fortunate enough to be the CEO there for 15 years.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that, you know, in my job, you know, I interview quite a lot of chief executives, managing directors, leaders of businesses, and invariably when you ask them about their company, a lot of the time they'll talk about their people, and they say the most important aspect of my company is my people. But
Sure.
you know, I never really always feel convinced that actually that is the reality when you start talking to them about. I mean, can you just give us an idea of when you're asked by a new big business or small business to come in and help them with the recruitment? What are the kind of the things that you're doing to really get an understanding of how relevant, sorry, how realistic their values are towards their people?
Yeah, and we have the benefits now of a lot of data, and therefore we can use that data in an intelligent way to actually prove to them that in some cases that they're actually wrong and ill-informed or misinformed about what they're looking for. I suppose the point you make around people is absolutely key. So at Page, we don't have any assets except for people. We own nothing else. So, you know, the experience, the quality of the 7,000 people is everything. We're worth about £2 billion on the London Stock Exchange. So, you know, that whole value is just purely in the people that we've got. And therefore, it really is important that we manage to not only attract the best talent, but also motivate them and, of course, keep them, because attrition is so expensive. And so when CEOs come to me and say, look, you know, I absolutely agree with you, Steve, people, they tend to often quickly forget that. And they're not thinking through the eyes of the person who might want to join them or the person that's already working from them. They're probably looking through their own eyes and thinking, well, I like it here. The culture suits me. I mean, I'm in this industry, isn't it wonderful, and everything else. But you've got to make sure that you're thinking, or your knowledge is more around what your employees want, not what you want, because otherwise they just won't come and work for you and they won't stay there, and so on. And of course, at Page, we have this luxury of, on the one hand, hearing a client extolling their virtues and how good they are and how attractive they are to work for and all the rest of it. But of course, we also, with 7,000 consultants constantly interviewing people, we see the other side of it, which is the candidates exiting businesses. And so, you know, on the one hand, we'll be recruiting for Unilever, let's say, but on the other, we're interviewing candidates from Unilever that are looking for a job. And they're telling us what they think. And it's incredible how often there's a mismatch between the two.
Yeah. And I suppose with the drinks and hospitality sectors in particular, I guess there's an element sometimes of it is a fantastic industry. You know, we have a great product we all, love, not just to drink, but all the whole stories behind it. And there's an element that, we almost sort of feel lucky to have a job or to be working in that sector. I mean, can you give us a sense of like when you're dealing with a business that clearly has quite a lot of attrition, there's a lot of people who come and go, and that mismatch, how do you go about actually trying to really realign them and making them realize that actually their values aren't matching the current candidate pools that they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, again, because I'm so old, I can think back to what it was like when I was younger and how I thought as a 25-year-old. And I was a lot more conservative around my thinking and the way that I operated. I listened to my boss. I did what I was told. If he's said, and it was a he always, if he said, you've got to work from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, I just did it, and didn't really question it. And certainly if you'd started saying, Steve, back then, what were the values of the company, and what was the vision of the business, and what was their approach to D&I, and so I wouldn't have even known what you were talking about. If you're not clear on all of these subjects today, then you will be judged. And I know this from just talking to my own daughters, let alone all the thousands and millions of candidates we have around the world. You are judged, and lockdown, for example, the last 18 months has been an incredible time for us all to evaluate, hasn't it? Not just our jobs, but where we live, who we're living with, all sorts. And I'm sure we've all got friends that have made some pretty dramatic decisions. But job-wise, that couldn't be more the case. So that companies have really been laid bare, as they say, when the tide goes out, you often see who's swimming naked. And, the reality is that I think candidates have had a very clear view on what their company is actually like and what they really care about. And do they care about you? And do they communicate well with you? And do they support you in the new way of working that we now are faced with from home or whatever? And if not, they'll do something about it. And so, for us, I've not been through clearly a global virus like this pandemic, and it hit our results, you can imagine, when we're so reliant on face-to-face. But fortunately, technology stepped in, and we were able to replace that by these sorts of methods, video. And actually, I'm pleased to say we're back now beyond where we were in 2019 because of the sheer activity of candidates who judge their employers going, I don't like what I see, and I don't like what I felt over the last 18 months. I'm going to do something about it. And they don't hang around.
Yeah, so that's a really key message, I think, for the drinks industry in particular, is that you just can't rely on the fact that you can travel around the world and go and visit all these amazing wineries anymore. You need to be, as Katie was saying there's this conscious consumer, which therefore means there must be the conscious employee. So they're judging, as you say, that whole all those value sets, far more than, as I say, when through my career as well.
Totally, and I can see it on our own social media internally. We've got one of the Microsoft products, Yammer, and it's an incredible way for us to all communicate. And in small groups, social groups, all sorts, professional groups, networking, different countries, and so on. And I follow them all, and I also am one of the most regular posters on there with a lot of video content and so on, speaking directly to the employees, doing town halls, where people can actually type in questions, they get liked. You can suddenly see 300 people liking something about when are you going to improve maternity pay, and you're left clearly having to handle that question and live, and it gives you credibility if you do it well and not accordingly. But if you just assume and don't do all of these different things, we've been doing engagement surveys throughout the pandemic, because obviously so much changed in terms of the way we work and everything else, people working isolated on their own and so on. We checked in with them regularly. We did pulse surveys to certain populations we were concerned about. And it really tells us what they're thinking. It's anonymous. You're using an external company. They will put down exactly how they feel because they know it's anonymous. And it gives you a, wow, okay, we've got some challenges here and we need to resolve them. Because if we don't, then we're going to have very high attrition the moment this pandemic slows down. And so unfortunately we're not. And I think, to give you an idea of the value of getting that right, and we're a long way from perfect, we've hired 800 people in the last 12 months from our competitors. Now, those 800 people in 2019 billed about 100 million for our competitors. They now work for us with, I would like to think, superior tools and so on. So if you can get it right, then your attractiveness and to people wanting to work for you and so on can be really good in the competition we face.
Okay, the last year, the whole area of diversity and inclusion, and I suppose the equity words, has really become into the mainstream, and obviously rightly so.
Yeah.
And particularly so actually in retail, sorry, in the hospitality and the drink sector, there's been a real awakening, I think, to be honest, around that area. Can you just give us some advice really on how employers can recruit better, can recruit more diversely? Because it's very easy to say, to use this, the words, but how do you actually go about it? You know, how do you go and attract a whole different set of people potentially to come and work for you?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is you've got to get your house in order first. You know, you've got to make sure you actually represent what employees want in the first place, because, you know, if you're not authentic around your values and what you represent as a company and the vision you've got and the direction you're going and who you want to do that with and so on, you know, it's going to be very difficult to recruit for you. So, you know, it's got to be genuine and it's got to be real in terms of getting that right. Then, of course, the answer, of course, is to go to a decent recruitment company and seek their advice, because, well, you can tell, I mean, you know, hopefully you can tell anyway that, you know, 35 years recruiting for consumer brands, as I have, around the world, I've learned quite a lot about employer branding, and a lot of them get it wrong. So, you know, they also must make sure they brief us properly. And I've filled jobs, you know, way above 100,000, and I've never met anybody from the company because they didn't want to meet me. They didn't think that was actually a good use of their time. So they just briefed us over the phone or even by fax once, I remember. And fine, we'll have a go at filling it. But you can imagine, well, it's like sort of shooting targets in the dark, absolutely hopeless. But then other companies will invest a huge amount of time in making sure they communicate with us and therefore with their candidates exactly the type of people who do well in their organization and what sort of cultural fit they're looking for and so on. And when they spend that time, it's invaluable for us being able to then sell to the very strongest candidates to come and join them.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I know we chatted before we had this conversation about this idea of having an actual partnership or actually working with recruitment agencies as an extension of your business, which I hadn't really kind of, I don't know whether I've sort of really heard companies talk in that way before. But clearly that in this area in particular, it's actually essential to get that expertise from outside your own bubble, as it were.
Totally. And I mean, you know, I mentioned Unilever, but many other companies, HSBC, whatever, Glaxo, these are really big global client relationships we have. And, you know, it works both ways, because clearly there's a pressure on us to keep delivering. Otherwise, we lose a big chunk of business, which we can't afford to lose, you know. But absolutely, it has to be about a partnership. And I think, look, I'm well aware there certainly was, if there isn't today, but a stigma attached to recruitment agencies, as you call them. And you know, that stigma is justified in many cases. You know, they're highly commission driven and so on, and therefore aren't going to give you always the most impartial advice. Well, therefore, you need to go to a company who's a bit more longer term in its thinking. And we don't offer commission, we offer profit share. You know, we work in teams. That profit share is part of that team profit. And it's really key to make sure, therefore, you build that partnership. And I, you know, I could, that was lightning. You can, you know, I can think of many, but to one example, I mean, Colgate, I recruited all of their sales and marketing people for 15, 20 years, all of them, except for the odd internal one. But so, I mean, literally they're dependent. And by the end, you can imagine they would ring me up and say, Steve, you know, so-and-so's been transferred to New York. We've got a gap here. You know, can you help us? Yep. And then sometimes I would actually ring back in a week and say, I've got the person you need. I know you do assessment centers for 6 candidates, but just see this one. I'm absolutely convinced he is perfect or she is perfect for the role, and they are.
It's almost like it's almost like taking a more professional approach to recruiting staff, rather than being a bit like, oh, I know somebody who's from so and so, and I mean the drinks industry in particular is very incestuous from the point of view of people move around and they kind of know each other, and but in a way you're saying that even within that kind of environment, you still need that independent consultancy to be making sure that you're.
I mean, the opposite of what you've just said is, to be unprofessional about it when you're recruiting your biggest asset. It's not the wisest thing, is it? So, I mean, it is really important to get it right. And it doesn't matter how much your product sells itself or whatever it is, that's just not going to be good enough. The bottom line is, if you had better talent, you'd perform even better. That's always the way. If we had less attrition and we recruited even higher talent, of course, we'd be better. And so it's really important to maximize that opportunity when you're taking people in. You want them to land highly motivated, highly capable, and then you want to keep them that way for as long as you possibly can. And it's really important to get them right. And they will find you out if you're just talking a great game and then you can't deliver.
Yeah, and it seems, particularly with the drink sector, that it needs to attract people who wouldn't normally always think of working within, say, the wine trade, and being able to work with professional agencies that can find talent from other sectors, be it FMCG, be it sales, marketing, or whatever. Just in the time we've got before we bring in Paul, I don't know, a slightly glib question, I suppose, but what are the traits that you see in the kind of the best business leaders, and what are the traits that you see in kind of some of the worst business leaders when you sit down and do talk to them? What kind of alarm bells go on, or what bells work?
I think worst are probably those that sit in an ivory tower and believe they've got it right and actually don't engage with their staff. I would always talk to consultants, managers, directors, and so on. I certainly wouldn't want to just hang out with my executive board, and because I'm never going to really learn how the other 6,900 people are feeling. So, it is absolutely critical that we're very engaged with our staff, that we communicate regularly with our staff, and we do it with authenticity. So again, you meet some business leaders and you think, well, I'm not sure I'd believe in you. And I'm not sure you've got the values that I've got, and therefore I'm not sure I like, therefore, the type of business you're likely to be leading, and so on. So I think authenticity, obviously courage, and courage, it does take a brave person to sometimes go, look, I haven't got it right, and we need to start, we need to look at this, and perhaps the starting point is to really understand how people are feeling with a staff engagement, and then from there you can possibly start to lay bare your issues and start to work on them.
It's fascinating. I must admit, having been working in publishing companies all my life, I remember once I had a managing director who, there were always rumours of my magazine being sold or closed, and he basically said to me, imagine there's a big sword of Damocles going above your head, and it's either up there or here, but yes, you are always threatened with being made redundant. And it was like, that was like his way to motivate me from that concern.
Well, I mean, that because of my personal circumstances, I'm very passionate about disability and trying to improve the working opportunities for the disabled sector. I know for a fact more disabled people were made redundant in the last year than the able-bodied people. And it's a shame. They're a soft target, and I just don't think that's the right thing to have done. So we're doing the opposite. And like I say, and you're right to use words like equity now, because it's not just about diversity, because we can all go and hire one of something. The key is to make sure that the equity of each of those diversities looks truly like the audience we're trying to sell to or attract. And that's absolutely key, and that goes right across disability, and then it goes across, when we started posting stuff around, because we're carbon neutral, and we'll be net zero in a few years. This was really important to our staff. I mean, you could see the number of people that replied to me directly, and these are consultants that will tell me that I'm doing a good job or not. It's not something I would have dared do 35 years ago, but absolutely they'll tell you their opinions.
Well, okay, well, let's bring in Paul. I don't know if Paul, you can, Paul Mabry, if you can.
I'm here, my friend.
Paul, how you doing, sir? You right?
Great. Really great comments, Steve. Thank you. I was learning the whole way. Thank you.
Yeah, well, well, the reason why I was keen to sort of involve you in this conversation is because, you know, I don't know how long ago it was when you first started the PICS idea, but I know it's been months rather than years. But I mean, in terms of how you've been able to build the teams, just give us a quick introduction to how you managed to kind of like bring your business to life.
Yeah, so we, you know, obviously I've been around the industry a very long time. Fortunate to meet people over my career, and in October of last year, we started to decide to make the PICS vision something real. The first part of that was creating a grand vision. It's like a gravitational pull that allows people to have a meaning in their job. They want to do something special, otherwise it's just a job. And then I also wanted to see which were the key experts that were going to fill out those components to execute on that grand vision. And I choose early. It's unusual for startups like what I did, which is I believe in hiring player coaches out of the gate. So they really get their hands dirty and understand the frameworks that they're going to build and manage later in the future. It does create a lot of problems because they have to be scrappy, but then eventually they have to evolve out of being scrappy and doing into coaching. So it's an unusual way to do it. A lot of people like to hire younger or, you know, but I believe that player coach, because they have experience, they understand frameworks, but then they also bring a gravitational pull with them, right? Meaning that they have all kinds of talent that they know and everyone respects them and understands them. So for a startup, it's all about the talent that you can get in and start working as fast as possible, and how much you can avoid the storming phase of a team creation, because that's disruptive. So I like to go at least to norming or performing as fast as possible. And I also needed a mix of wine and tech. And then the last thing is, I think there's been a terrible way that tech companies have recruited talent in the past. They offer this fool's gold, this iron pyrite of stock, that you're going to get all this stock and we're going to pay you a reduced fee. I think that is the lucky lottery ticket that everyone gets to hold, but we pay above market rate or market rate for every single position. We have the best benefits we possibly can, and the stock is there if we make it all across the finish line. But you know, after being a gray hair and being through a couple of exercises myself, I have a lot of stock that's worth no money. I didn't want to use that as the way to attract the talent. I want them to be working hard for what they believe in and being equitably paid in that process.
But they've also had to believe you, because I mean, obviously the PICS, you haven't actually kind of launched officially yet, have you? So you are ultimately the ultimate startup, and that you're essentially, it's Paul Mabry that they're really believing in. So you have to have those values, and like Steve was saying a minute ago, in terms of.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the gravitational pull about who I am is part of the process, right? Can they believe it, that I'm going to tell them the truth? And I think that hopefully my reputation has said that. I always try to tell the industry what I believe in the best possible way, and I'm wrong, and I admit to that. And you know, needing a team that has also that same both intellectual curiosity and intellectual humility is important, because the reality is, as much as I've done wine tech in my career, this is my first time doing this kind of wine tech. As much as Erica Ducey has done content in her career, this is her first time doing this kind of content. And I can go on with every one of us. It's not a rote path to success. We all have to learn and recreate and adapt on the way.
Okay, so I guess you've also, you know, got to be really careful, you know, what kind of people you're hiring, because you've only got one chance to start up, as it were. So what can you give us an idea to other people about what it is that you look for in candidates? What are the values that you're hoping to act as your mentors in your own business?
Yeah, no, well, obviously I look for people that are smarter than me, which is fortunately a low bar, and makes it easy to attract some good talent. But again, that intellectual curiosity and intellectual humility are a key component. Caring is fundamental. I think that's something that I want to imbue as long as I'm CEO, that we care about our employees, our customers, you know, our subscribers. Creativity and you know, the ability to fail forward as well, some bravery associated with that, or some risk tolerance, and definitely a bit scrappy. You know, if you bring someone who's a senior leader to a startup, generally it's a recipe for failure, because they have used to a framework that they have bureaucracy that doesn't exist here. It's all, you know, building the airplane while we're flying. So it's often challenging.
Okay, and did you use a recruitment consultancy, outside help, or how did you actually go about finding the talent you needed?
I love recruitment agencies, just to start off with it. But as a startup, first of all, you haven't really solidified your values. So helping a recruitment agency understand those, you got to get into that a little while. I think frame that up. And also, as Steve says, a partnership. And a partnership requires resources and time and energy. And if you go too early, you actually set the recruitment agency up for failure in yourself. And the people you're bringing in are not matching you. So I only bring agencies in when we have a stable ability to actually partner with them to say, hey, this is what we're looking for. And here's what we're thinking. And here's why because he's right. If you don't treat it as an extension of your team, then it's just a transaction, and it leads to oftentimes hit or miss results. Wouldn't you agree with that, Steve?
Yeah, spot on.
Wow. I'm winning. Yeah, for sure. I believe that it takes team and people, for sure.
So Steve, just coming back to you, I mean, hearing what Paul says there, anything there you want to pick up on in terms of what he was?
No, he's absolutely right, and I like the fact that he talks about people who get dirty and hands-on, and we're the same, because although we're big in some markets, we're starting in others. In the middle of the pandemic, we launched in the Philippines, which was our 37th country, and the person who we've basically selected to run that organization, all of 20 employees at the moment, after 9 months, we flew him, and he was a senior director in our Spanish business running 80 people, and I don't want him to go, hang on a minute, why would I possibly do that, and go backwards to 10 and then try and grow it all again, and so on, because one, he trusts us, and obviously, well, not obviously, but he's more experienced, so therefore he's married, he's got children, all of which he has to think about. We've got to relocate them, we've got to make sure they're comfortable in the Philippines, education's taken care of to their satisfaction, all of those things. And he's got to trust the leaders that we're not going to change our strategy a few weeks later and say, sorry, Albert, you're high and dry in the Philippines. Good luck. So it's really important, though, to get people who can be hands-on and get involved.
And also that, Paul, just coming that manager as mentors, is that something that that's part of how you manage people? Was that something that you were keen to instill in your business from the beginning?
I'd like to think so. I like to think that we are teaching lessons, and not just vertically, it should be horizontally as well. I mean, look, there's a lot of learning that's occurring at a wine tech company. I mean, it's wine tech business, and now adding content in, which is a whole new culture, and each one of these has their own cultural paradigms that you have to help other people learn. A small example, one of the greatest successes I found in this learning is, the difference between the way tech and editorial work. Editorial builds this great magazine and they chase their way to that perfect state, and tech is the opposite. We have clay and we hand it back and forth, and we're so iterative. And how did we bridge the gap between those two cultures was awesome, but also a challenge. And the way we've done is we make things smaller now, and I will always use that lesson going forward. We call it the 10 100 500, which is do something with 10 size, now scale it up to 100 and scale up to 500. And each of those places you stop and learn, and now the editorial team learns that you can be much more iterative and agile. The tech team learns to put a little bit more polish in certain places, and it's been a great learning.
Yeah, and I must say, from my point of view, I think it's fantastic to see a business like yours that's put content, editorial, like really proper, professional, original content. So it seems crazy to call content original, but so much of it is. But I mean, original content is fantastic, and I think that's a real accolade for Pix. Right from the start. We're actually sort of coming. This half an hour's whiz by. I can't believe it. We're kind of at the end of our session. But Steve, can I thank you? Really appreciate your time and your expertise, and working across other sectors is so great for you to be able to take part in this. And I obviously encourage anybody watching who's looking at their recruitment issues at the moment to check out the page group. But thanks, Steve, and obviously Paul, for your support, and thank you for the session. Cheers.
Yeah, have a pint together.
Back to you.
Absolutely.
Brilliant session. There are some questions, but Steve, there were some questions for you, but if you don't mind, perhaps I'll just hand them over to you by an email or something. Is that all right?
No problem at all.
Thank you very much. I'm going to now, Dan, are you there?
I am.
Dan, I'm delighted you could get your video on as well, please, Dan. I'm delighted to introduce Dan Cullen-Shoot, and I'm feeling a bit guilty because we dragged him out of his COVID bed and made him feel guilty. The poor guy's been very, very poorly this week. Are you feeling better, first of all, Dan?
100%.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for joining us. So Dan is the CEO and founder of Creature London, which is an advertising agency, and I love this phrase, he'll tell us what it means, that prides itself on helping brands harness intelligent misbehavior. And also following on from that previous conversation we've had, I see that your company was voted one of the best places to work in 2021 by Campaign. So well done on that. So I'm going to give the floor to you, Dan. I think you just have to share the screen.
Fabulous. I'm sure this will work seamlessly. Which one do I want? No, not that one. Sorry, apologies, everyone. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
Fabulous. So hi everyone. My name's Dan, and yeah, I'm going to talk about innovating, interacting, and engaging with the real people. That's not moving on for me. Oh, where it will. Or to put it slightly more crudely, why nobody really cares about your liquid. I should apologise in advance, partly because a lot of this will come across as quite flippant, because that's what I'm like. But also, yeah, as Sophie says, I've had a slightly funny week with the COVIDs, which might make this a bit scrappy. Nothing to worry about. I'm totally fine. But the symptom that isn't talked about enough, as far as I'm concerned, is that your children can no longer go to school or nursery, and you and your wife have to spend a lot of time trying to work out how to write presentations for proper professionals while also keeping them alive. So yeah, innovate, interact, and engage with the real people, or why nobody really cares about your liquid. First off, I guess, just who am I and why should you give the slightest of tosses about what I think? So I think I would describe myself, when it comes to the world of drinks and wine in particular, as professionally curious. I run an advertising agency called Creature, but also a strategic consultancy called White Crow. And over the last 10 years, we've worked with a variety of alcohol and particularly wine brands, including Berry Brothers and Rudd, the Côte d'Iron Vignoble, and also Accolade, who I'm sure all of you know are responsible for Echo Falls, Kamala, Hardy's, and various other sort of main street wine brands. Also worth calling out that I am personally zealous, because I do just bloody love wine. So what I'm going to talk about over the next 15 minutes or so is kind of rooted in my experience in the wine world, my experience just in the broader agency world, but also my experience just as a human, because I think too often that bit is forgotten.
Dan, sorry to interrupt. Your slides aren't actually moving on this.
Is it not moving? Fabulous.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, okay. If you have to do it like that, just
I'll
do
bounce
it
through
like
it all
that.
again. The punchy subtitle, who am I? Little joke. Anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about wine. And I think the first thing to call out is there is no underestimating how much sort of time, energy, craft, technique, science, love, care, attention, you name it, goes into making wine. Whether it's, you know, the terroir, the season, the climate, the temperature, the year, the bottling, the transportation, etc., etc., etc. Like, making wine is a true craft, and I think having been lucky enough to meet a fair few producers over well, in my life, but certainly over the last few years, it breeds a very specific sort of person, and they are incredibly impressive people. They are incredibly detailed people, and they are understandably incredibly, and I mean this as a compliment, obsessive about their liquid. The second truth, just to share, is that choosing wine is a fucking nightmare. And it's pretty obvious as to why. There's just so much fucking wine. There's just so much fucking wine. And this is kind of, I'm focusing obviously on the sort of the off-trade elements here, but for most people, when they go into the supermarket, this is what they're faced with: a kind of inexplicable, dense, impenetrable impossible to navigate wall of bottles that all look fairly similar. You can just about tell, unless you're in the posh bit with the special wooden shelving, which one's white and which one's red from a distance. But actually, when you sort of start to spend a little bit more, even that becomes harder as the bottles become thicker and the glass heavier. And this is the tricky thing, is this world is impenetrable, and we expect real people to navigate a very complicated and complex ecosystem when they're choosing this wine. And the truth is that real people don't know what they're talking about, and that's fine. Again, if calling wine producers and wholesalers obsessive was meant as a compliment, this is absolutely not meant as any kind of criticism. You can't know everything about wine, not least because, in the nicest possible way, wine people aren't helping. There are certain sort of areas of the world where people are obsessed with sort of simplification, and there are certain areas of the world where people are perhaps less obsessed with simplification and quite enjoy the complexity of what they do. Wine, I would suggest, as a general rule, absolutely not exclusively, and I'm conscious there are people who've spoken already on this who are living examples of fighting to make this journey a bit easier. But as a general rule, people who know about wine really, really like that they know about wine. Not professionally speaking, just on a purely human level, wine knowledge is a badge to be worn, and that's fine, because knowing a lot about wine is incredibly impressive. The problem is when that starts to translate into your marketing, and you expect people to do an awful lot of work for you. So marketing, let's have a quick look at some marketing cliche. A very wise, smart, generic white male marketer once said, nobody wants a drill, they want a hole in the wall. The point being, stop selling product, start thinking about benefit of product, start thinking about what you actually do with this thing we want to sell. The problem, of course, is that that's also nonsense, because nobody wants a hole in the wall either. People want a nice room that they can feel nice in. And that sounds glib, but it's very easy to take a short step from this is the thing that I make and I really like it, to what do I want people to do with it? The much harder, bigger and more complicated step is, who are these people? What do they think about this thing that I make? What do they want to do with it? And how can I help them get from, I haven't heard of you and I don't really care what you do, all the way around to, I have heard of you, I still probably don't care anywhere near as much as you do about what you do, but I'm willing to spend 10 to 15 pounds on it and introduce it into my life. And I think in our kind of experience at Creature, this is where wine too often goes wrong. I've sort of touched on this, but the world of wine is obsessed with the drill, and it's understandable. Will I name names? I won't name names. I'll name sector. It'll become obvious. You can find me on LinkedIn, but we spent a lot of time at Creature working in the slightly more mainstream world of lager, and it is fair to say that a kind of obsession with the liquid is not limited to the wine world, and again, to a degree, understandably so. If your life's work is day after day of obsessing over detail and quality and calibration and so on and so forth, then it's very, very easy to sort of fall into the trap of believing that what you do matters. And in wine, it really, really does. This is a simple map of probably what 0.01% of the sort of global wine producing geography, and it's insane. Like, there is more knowledge there than most people will ever have about wine, and that is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of it. And it all matters. It is all hugely important. But the problem is, real people aren't looking to buy drills. They're not even looking to buy holes in the wall. They're looking to buy an experience. We worked with Cote Your Own a couple of years ago, and our sort of off our own backs research, we asked them for data. We always start these processes by asking people for data, and their data was sales data, and their data was distribution data. There was nothing that they were able to give us in terms of customer attitudes, in terms of customer behaviors, in terms of essentially how real people felt about their brand and the role that that brand played in their lives. And so we went out and we did a lot of our own research, and what we discovered was fascinating. We discovered that people didn't really care about the liquid. Some people a small proportion when asked about their, and bearing in mind, sorry, when I talk audience here, I'm talking about the population. I'm not talking about serious wine drinkers or connoisseurs, etc. I'm talking about people who sometimes enjoy having a drink. Their favorite wine wasn't a peppery Malbec, it wasn't a crisp Viognier, it was a glass of red with the hubby on a Wednesday night when we both had a shit day at work. It was, you know, getting the girls round and getting a bit silly on Chianti and taking photos of each other with my best friend's new selfie stick. Almost every single response we got was couched not in the bottle, not in the liquid, not even in the drinking experience, but in the broader context within which that wine sat. And that's what really sort of pushed us. We kind of took what was unfairly, but definitively viewed as a fairly fusty wine brand. I think if you accept that for a lot of people, the world of wine is intimidating, then it doesn't get much more intimidating than French wine. And if you're going for a sort of a shorthand for French wine, Côte du Rhône is pretty near the top of the list. But it was very much the sort of the dusty bottle that you got when your parents came round on a Sunday, because you couldn't go wrong with a Côte du Rhône. And so we spoke to them about their actual potential audience, the world in which that existed, and how they kind of how they interacted with the wine, how they felt about the wine, the role the wine actually played within their lives. And it led us to a very different place in terms of how we sort of thought about stuff, which is something that hardly ever happens. We sometimes at Creature play a slightly mean game when we're pitching for things, which is we play a game called Spot Your Ad, and we will put up in front of the CMO just sort of 12 or 16 screen grabs from tele ads or print ads, and just give people 5 seconds to sort of call out which one's theirs. And with wine, it's terrifyingly easy to play a very, very mean game. There's a lot of bottle, there's a lot of vineyard, and depending on whether it's white or red, there's a lot of green or sort of mauvey type filters. And that kind of didn't at all speak to what we were seeing about the behaviors that were surrounding wine. And that, I think, is a sort of a very simple truth, that winemakers are obsessed with the liquid and real people only care about the moment. And that provides a really interesting sort of role for brand and for advertising in that process. It's worth saying, because I'm generalizing hugely, and you know, apologies if that is annoying, I'm going to blame COVID. But obviously, this doesn't apply to all real people. There are real people out there who care enormously about wine, who look forward to en primeur every year, and who will invest heavily in first growth, second growth, who will be laying wine down as well as buying nice wine to drink. But one of the key processes we went through with Côte du Rhône and with Berry Brothers and with various other people is that those people are not and will never be the most important for your business. By a sort of a vast difference, the greatest quantity of wine, the greatest quantity, to be honest, of most products, this isn't specific to wine at all, will be bought by people who only buy it once or twice. Or again, to go back to sort of my opening title, the people who will make you most money don't really give a toss about what you make. They just like what it does or how it fits within their life. Which, you know, can seem pretty depressing. So you've got an impenetrable language that most people don't speak. It turns out they don't really want to speak it anyway, and it's an incredibly competitive market. But the good news is there is an answer. This is literally why brands exist, to provide a kind of a set of codes or a shortcut that make these confusing landscapes slightly more navigable. And certainly when we were talking to Côte du Rhône, and when we were talking to Kamala, and when we were talking to Echo Falls and various others, we were looking for cheat codes, if you like. We were looking for something that people could hang on to. We often talk about the one note analysis of wine, which is something I'm sure everyone is familiar with, that, you know, in the same way that the best way to pretend that you are fluent in a foreign language is to learn how to say in that language. If you don't know that, it's genuinely a brilliant trick. If you're in Spain, but don't say say pues, ique, and everyone will assume you're fluent. In the same way that works with wine. Just know a little bit about a few things. Know that Riojas should be peppery. Know that Sauvignon Blancs should be crisp. Know that, etc., etc., etc. those are all obviously rooted in product still. And what we wanted to do with Coat Your Own was give somebody their one note analysis of why Coat Your Own was a brand that spoke to them. For Coat Your Own, that was everyday sophistication, the sort of the twisted play on the sophistication you expect from French wine, but placed in front of people in a way that spoke to the life they were living. And it's something that still hardly any wine brands are doing. I think it's incredibly refreshing just to hear some of the people who've been talking this afternoon, that a shift is happening, and it's being driven by entrepreneurs, and it's being driven by modern people who recognize that employer brand is valuable, who recognize that people are the heart of any business, etc., etc. But actually, once that's in place, then we need to start thinking not about what we're making, but about the people who are out there either buying it or not, because at the moment nobody is. The joy, though, in case I've been negative, I haven't meant to be negative, but in case I have been negative, the joy of all of this is that for some of you, this makes the job easy. We're fond of saying at Creature that nothing makes us more excited than when we're invited to play in a sector where it feels like all the chief marketing officers have met in some secret underground lair and agreed the rules of engagement, a sort of pact of mediocrity, if you like. As long as nobody else does anything good, then none of us can get fired. And certainly when Coat Your Own came in, it wasn't the budget that excited us. It wasn't the promise of free wine, because there was no free wine. It was the opportunity to do something very different. And I think, we love doing that. We love the stuff we've done with Kamala since, but I think there is still a huge opportunity for wine brands who are prepared to put the real people that will or won't drink them ahead of the sort of the fanaticism around the liquid. There's a massive opportunity to do something very, very different. And that, to go back to the very beginning, and to Sophie's introduction, that's what intelligent misbehavior is. Intelligent misbehavior is not the disruption that advertising used to talk about in the 80s, where you just, if you wanted to sell some tires, you went out and shot a 180-second film with an iguana and a bunch of surreal fireworks in the desert. It's knowing absolutely what the rules are, and then being smart enough to know when the time is to break them, and when the time is not to break them. So no truths, because I think that the one of my key things here, particularly when it comes to marketing, is there aren't any truths. There are just things that sound smart in presentations. But some thoughts from me. You're not selling wine to wine obsessives, you're selling wine to real people. Real people care more about the room than they'll ever care about the drill. Real people find wine confusing and intimidating, and it's our job as marketeers to help them and thus drive up the sales of whoever we're marketing for. And then finally, easily, and one day people will cotton on to this and start doing it, but thankfully they haven't thus far. Look at what everyone else is doing, and then just whatever you do, don't do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Well, it was certainly, from our point of view, it was absolutely well worth dragging you out of bed. So we're really appreciative. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass you over, just bearing in mind the time, over to Richard, who's going to manage a panel now, and they're going to talk about using content to drive your e-commerce strategies. So over to you, Richard. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan. That was brilliant. And actually, don't rush off, because I might actually bring you into this panel at some stage as well, because
I will sit right here awaiting your call.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, because it actually very nicely fits into what we're now going to be talking about. So if Kevin, Erin, Leslie want to click on your videos, there we go, marvelous. Yeah, so we're actually going to talk about content in terms of really picking up on what Dan was talking about there, in terms of it's all very well having a brand or having an image or having some sort of communication, but it has to be relevant to whoever you're hoping is going to read it or watch it. So that's this session is really looking at, particularly around digital and e-commerce, what sort of different types of content people are using and needing to specialize in. So to help us, I have Leslie Ake, who's Vice President of Product at Pix, which obviously we just heard from Paul earlier, the new wine search discovery platform, and she's a specialist in software product management, so very much around building or helping to build the products that content sits in. Erin Smith, who's the marketing director at Slurp, fast-growing dedicated e-commerce platform, which is part of the Fraser Copestick group. And prior to that, she was the head of brand marketing at Majestic Wine. And also from Napa, we have Kevin Shaw, who's founder and chief executive of Stranger in Stranger, as Sophie was saying earlier, the leading drinks design agency. Perhaps, Erin, if I can come to you first. So with Slurp, you're dedicated. Your job is to sell wine through the website. Can you talk us through about how you're using content, particularly to do that?
Well, I think, thanks so much for having me actually on the panel today. It's been great to hear all the different panelists, so really appreciate participating. For us specifically, one of the first things, Slurp is very much in a startup phase at the moment. They've been an online player, they have a shop, but actually because of the pandemic, they saw a huge amount of growth, and it's been really trying to keep that momentum going and taking it and scaling that business. For us specifically, how we're using content, I think if you want to do it successfully, one of the things you have to really be clear about is kind of defining what your goal is as a business, because then how can content help you reach that goal? Because that is how I'm looking at how I define success. Is it helping me either grow my consumer base or drive transactions or revenue? That is primarily as a pure play e-commerce retailer, that's what I'm looking at. Obviously, that's part of actually sitting within a bigger business where it's also trying to grow those brands in addition as part of the offering that we are offering to our consumer base. So I think for us, it's really important to say, what is it that we're trying to achieve? So, and then how can content help me get there? That accompanied with data is actually really where we're going. So making sure that, actually Katie touched on it, personalization. Consumers will keep coming back to you if you're showing them the right products that they're looking for at the right time. And that could be around occasions, just as what Dan was talking about. So I think making sure that the content that you're using, we're actually using data. So the segmentation that Katie had talked about, making sure that if someone buys a Sauvignon Blanc, a New Zealand Sauvignon, they're probably more inclined to buy fresh whites. So those are the types of things that we're going to try and put in front, tell the consumer that, tell them that you're actually helping them. We know that you love this product, therefore you should actually try this other product, and you will build trust with that consumer and they will keep coming back to you. And it also means though that I'm not actually going to try to sell them a product that they have no interest in buying. If I can see that a customer of ours, it just like what would happen if I ran a shop and I knew my customer base really well in a local environment. I know that this person is a vegetarian, and that being a conscious consumer is actually very important to them. Looking at the data provides that to me. Make sure you get those products then in front of that consumer, because that inevitably will do the three things that I'm looking at trying to do for my business, which is acquire customers, retain those customers, and drive transactions, trying to trade people up, actually giving them a reason to explore outside and spend a little bit more, treat themselves. Those are the kinds of things, and content helps you do that. It is everything from the imagery and the bottles that you're using. So if you're trying to push a more premium product, make sure that you invest in some photography. It will help premiumize what you're doing. Like Kevin and the beautiful designs of his labels actually are part of that. I think that's really important, because I'm looking at it for every product that we're also listing. It helps make sure that we're listing the right products, and our range is what our consumers are looking for, and giving them a reason. Buying wine can be risky. It's an expensive product. It's one of the most expensive products someone puts in their grocery basket. And I'm actually in an environment where they can't easily return it. I'm asking them to trust me, and I need to give them lots of reasons to do that. And content can play a real key role in that. So it's not just visual content and written content.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so it's very much around having a very clear commercial strategic approach to content, rather than with creating a beautiful image or creating a great story. It's very much driven towards the commercial aspect. Can I ask you, Kevin, from your point of view, when you're working with different clients on digital briefs that come to you, what are the things that you need from a business to be able to understand what sort of content, what sort of design or support that you can provide them in the most effective way?
We're all about telling stories. So as Paul said, like the grand vision, that's what we ask whenever a client comes into us is, why should anybody care about you? You know, what is it that you've got that should stand out? And it's a real, you know, you go down that existential wormhole with them, and when they stop crying and they come up with an idea, that's what you base your label on and your story, and hopefully then your communications platform. And we do these guidelines about how look and feel for websites, and you know what your interior should look like and all this sort of stuff. But it all comes back down to the story at the beginning of the day. And I was thinking, you know, listening to everybody today, I was thinking about a couple of things. You know, I live in California. There's about 400 wineries in Napa, and we got asked to do this, just a SKU for one of the kind of classic wineries to try to bring younger people in. And they were all their back label was the same as every other wine back label. It's a family-owned winery. It's kind of, you know, it's got tannins and acid, and it goes great with the meat pie. Exactly the same as every other back label. And we started digging and asking and talking and all this, and we found out that they had the most incredible sustainable story, the most thought through thing I've ever come across, like from carnivorous insects to cover crops to water to energy, absolutely every aspect of their thing. And some expert had been in there and said it's the most well thought through program they'd ever seen. So I think it was great. And we managed to cram this story into a label. It's a beautiful engraving. It just looks stunning on t-shirts and posters, just big on this label. It's a great, just wonderful. Once you get that sort of stuff, it's gold, and you can do something to stand out. Very happy, very pleased. Best printer in the world. Great, beautiful bottle, very happy. So I went back to their website, you know, this was last year, went back to their website, and I was looking for this bottle on the website. And the website was all about, we're a family-owned winery, you know, all this sort of stuff. It was a classic that, you know, they hadn't done anything with it. And eventually I kind of went through and I found it. I found the label that we'd done, and in it, it said it's got berries, tannin, and acid, and goes really well with pizza. So at least it wasn't meat pie. We moved on. But I thought, oh my God, well, how can you not tell this story? So I started again from the top of the website, and it talked about the family, it talked about the vineyards, talked about visiting the thing and all that. And eventually there's this little button called Learn. And I went onto that and I learned about the family. And then at the bottom of that, I got onto this environmental message, clicked on that, and boom, all this stuff opened up. And I was totally captivated. I was really drawn in. And it's a really current message, I think, as we've already heard. This is a real killer message right now. And yet it was buried. It was buried so deep. And I was a bit upset, I've got to say. And so, you know, when we're going to clients, we're always saying, what is the story? What's the angle?
Yeah.
Just as a complete contrast to that, we also did this label last year where we put this rapper Snoop Dogg on a wine label called 19 Crimes. And it doesn't talk about the wine at all. It talks about being infamous and rebel against the label. If you go onto their website, or you can go onto their feed, you can get onto a thing called Ask the Dog Father, right? Where Snoop will actually give you advice in a very gangster kind of way, right? Yeah, and the feed is amazing. It's just like really feisty and in your face. Don't talk about wine at all. It's done 800,000 cases.
It's kind of replicable what Dan was saying in his presentation, but I guess not every wine producer has the benefit of someone like yourself who's going to take that amount of time to delve and to dig and to go into their business and to really, you know.
But every wine producer should ask themselves, what do I stand for?
Yeah.
And I don't care whether you're the tallest wolf, just stand for something.
Which is again exactly what Steve was saying. It's like, you know, you can't attract the right people if you're not going to stand. So Leslie, I coming to yourself. I mean, your I suppose your part of this becomes the beginning of building the digital platform in the first place. Can you just give us an idea from your perspective, how when you're designing websites and putting the product together, how do you then manage the kind of content side of it? What's the kind of brief that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, I think what's been great to hear everyone say is we're all talking kind of about the same thing, is that content ultimately needs to serve a purpose. You know, when you're working with a desktop app, a phone app, you have a limited amount of space to make a big impact and help the consumer solve whatever problem it is we're trying to solve. You know, that's something we talk about a lot in kind of the product management and product development space is, you know, what ultimately is the consumer trying to do? And so whatever you're doing, be it with tech, be it with content, needs to serve that purpose. So like when I think of tech, I kind of also think of products as homes. We're all just building homes. And so the tech side of that is, you know, it's the foundation, it's the walls, it's, you know, the light switches and the plumbing and that sort of thing. But the content is, you know, the furniture and the art and all these different pieces that when that, you know, homeowner comes home, they have a problem. They would like to sit down and perhaps have a glass of wine. And so they need a couch. They need something beautiful to look at. They need something to read. They need, you know, books on the bookshelves. So ultimately, if content is not ultimately serving that consumer's, meeting them where they are and helping them to solve the problem they have in hand, we don't have room for it. So we need to be very thoughtful about it. And we need to help also our suppliers, so all of the different places that we gather this content from, because, you know, from our perspective, from Prick's perspective, content is all nature of different things. It's bottle images, it's wine descriptions, it's ratings, all kinds of different things that we need to bring together in a meaningful way that allow, you know, each of those constituencies to represent themselves in the way that they need, in the way that we want, the way that they see, you know, best fit. But to bring that together in that moment to help that consumer solve the problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of describing, actually. It's a really visual way of describing how you build a product. I mean, in your career then, has the house aspect, the nice touchy-feely bits, have they become more important in the kind of products that you're building? It's become a lot more about the furniture, the art on the wall than it is the kind of the speed of the website or the I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, and particularly in this industry, you know, as Dan so articulately put it, there's just so much effing wine that it's hard for if we think about, you know, kind of Pix's mission to enable discovery, to spark discovery, to enable consumers to make quick and effective decisions. We can't do that without very effective content, and placing it in just the exact right places at the exact right time.
Brilliant. Erin, coming back to you, you mentioned that what you're measured on effectively, you know, that success is the content has to have a purpose, as Leslie is saying. Can you just sort of give us an idea in terms of, from Slurp's point of view, what are the key things you need to be getting right every week to hit the numbers that you need, and what are the steps that you take to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really it's an entire business effort though, because it's not just it is about having content, but if I'm sending out an email, for example, and it is I need to make sure the data that we have is actually captured in a way that the business can use it effectively to target these people. You need to make sure that your supply and logistics are online and that you have enough wine to actually support the promotions that you're running. So planning becomes actually a big part of that as well. And making sure that you're actually thinking all of those bits to the business, on the business side up, and then putting it in front of the customer actually at the right time. So some of that will be around things like making sure that some of the content themes, to Dan's point, they don't necessarily have to be about wine. It can be about relevant time. I mean, the Euros in particular, I would say, is quite hard actually for wine to trade because it is such a beer dominated event. But I think it's actually like this week we're running a promotion on France, but actually it's also because the Tour de France is ending at the end of the week. That cycling is quite relevant in Great Britain at the moment, and it is a popular sport that continues to grow. So it's like, how can we get hooks that are, like Dan said, it doesn't necessarily have to be about wine. It's about something relating to something relevant that is kind of top of mind for the consumer. That's kind of how you can play into that and use content to do that. So it could be in the emails, it can be in the way that you decide to kind of structure one of the promotions that you're using. It's how you talk about it in a way that's relevant for a customer, and it's solving the problem. The occasions is also a problem. I have a dinner with my father-in-law. I want to make sure I'm bringing the right wine that says the right thing about me, and I don't want to get that wrong. Same with your boss. It's going to be a little bit different than potentially me meeting up with my girlfriends on a Wednesday night. That is, it is a wine for that occasion, and it's kind of how.
As a business, you're kind of almost having to editorialize all the time. You're kind of having to think about it from a point of view of what might be selling. Like rosé is hot, rosé might sell, but it's how you're then going to tell the story of rosé that week.
Yeah, and I think I think really what we're trying to do is actually, I mean, really what we're trying to do is take the offline experience. If you walked into a shop, someone's going to say, "Hey, how are you? How can I help?" That's usually the first question, and it's, what is it that's relevant to that person? I'm having a dinner party. I'm looking for something specific, or we know, but how do you recreate some of those? What are the questions that we would ask? And I know that this would be the answer if you like these types of wines. If someone repeat purchases a certain style of wine, so a California Chardonnay, they may be more inclined to actually go towards an Australian Chardonnay rather than going like right for the straight Burgundy that you might expect, which is a bit more cleaner, does styles, and making sure that you can replicate, but talk to the consumer about that in a way that they understand. We know that you love California Chardonnay, before we think you would actually really like this Australian Chardonnay and give it a go.
Kevin, can I come back to you in terms of like the kind of the kind of briefs that you're getting? I mean, have you noticed in the last year more demand from agencies like yourselves to come onto people's platforms and saying, can you do as much of a makeover to our website as you do to a bottle or a label or a design?
It's not something that we do. We're very clear on, we do the idea and the packaging and the naming and the core message, and then we'll do kind of look and feel for things like that. It's always been the case in spirits that they're looking for a real cohesive brand message. I don't experience that as much in wine.
Okay.
I think it's something that wine can learn from other sectors. I've always said wine can always learn from every other sector, the luxury sector, but it's definitely something that that wine could learn from spirits, is how to think more broadly about their brand.
I think your wine example is actually a really good example of that you say, it's like there's a message that actually could make that brand different.
Yeah.
And that's something we struggle with as someone who's trying to retell these stories to our consumers, is that a lot of the producers have the same story, but maybe there's like a dog in one of the vineyards that's why it's on the label, and this dog is like the heart of that brand, and that is actually the thing that we would talk about in an email to the consumer to bring that brand to life. But the brand owner, the actual producer, oftentimes is saying, well, I'm 5th generation, we've been making this Rioja the same way for 400 years, like every other producer there. It's what is that point of difference for that brand? And then how can I, as a retailer, actually sell that on to our customers?
Great. Okay. Leslie, just coming back to yourself in terms of like you mentioned there at the beginning in terms of like, you know, you're building these products. I mean, is scalability an important aspect to all that? So you know, say with Pix, you know, you're starting as a startup, but I guess the intention is to become a platform that grows and grows, and you know, it might end up with millions of wine recommendations. And so how can you give us an idea of how you structure that into your kind of product development?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think in Dan's presentation, just seeing some of the you know, the retail shelves, we know that there is a tremendous amount of information that exists out there in the wine space, completely dispersed, comes in every format in every way. And so, you know, we do have to think at this stage of the company, you know, how can we partner to, you know, to acquire that information? How can we, in some circumstances, obviously create that information? How can we bring it all together, you know, in a meaningful way to present? How do we manage it? How do we, you know, partner to, you know, with various constituencies to actually manage that information? So it's certainly some, you know, some things that we have to consider now. You know, obviously, in a startup, you don't start out by building the grandest thing. You heard Paul earlier talk about, you know, kind of the small steps, the, you know, the 10, 100, 500, like we take things in little chunks and, you know, kind of experiment and prove things out. But we do, even as we're building today, we do have to think about those solutions and how we're going to get from A to B to B to C and further on. It's a very hard problem in this industry to solve, but then again, you wouldn't start a startup to, you know, do something easy. So that's why we're here.
Okay, Kevin, and the final word to you, Kevin. Just as you're, you know, we're all coming out of lockdown, hopefully, slowly but surely. I mean, what's your sort of final thought really on terms of how the drinks industry, in terms of how it's going to evolve, and some of the things that the kind of consumer behaviour changes? How do you see that's going to be playing out in terms of the kind of design and labelling and the imagery that you're going to be working on?
I think I think we've definitely because the COVID and what COVID has done is made us all order online, and so we've all had to deal with these apps, and everybody's been getting their elevator pitches focused a lot more than I've ever experienced, I have to say. We're getting a lot more clarity. Labels are getting punchier because they've got to work on phones. I don't know that that's going to change. I think there's going to still be a lot of that. I know I've seen those pictures of the supermarkets, but I think people are still going to be ordering a lot online as well. I hope for the wine industry, I hope things are going to broaden out from just being, you know, another Cabernet Sauvignon. I mean, the 19 Crimes is an icon to me because you know, they're launching seltzers. It's the first. I've been doing this for 27 years. It's the first time I've seen a wine do something that isn't wine. Yeah, and they're going to kill it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I hope other brands start to think more about. I think, as Dan said, you know, it's not all about this expert knowledge about the liquid. It's about other stuff than that. And I hope the wine industry starts to think that way.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that really kind of captures actually what we're trying to do with these sessions. Really, is learning from each other, learning from other sectors, learning from experiences that people, you know, we've all had similar experiences that's last year doing things like this, but it's how you then take that to the next level. So, thank you all to yourselves for that session, and obviously to all our speakers this afternoon. So from me, I'd just like to say thanks a lot for everyone's time, and really appreciate everyone tuning in. We will be writing this up and sharing the videos in due course. So thank you from me, and over to Sophie.
And thank you from me. Nothing more to say. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for all of you for participating. We'll see you next time. We'll be back in the autumn.
Okay, bye. Cheers.